The Most Unforgettable Talent Show, Performance of 2025. She stood at the edge of the stage, holding the microphone like it was something sacred. Her cardigan was buttoned all the way up, a soft, sky-blue wool that sagged a little at the shoulders. Her shoes were orthopedic. Her hands, knotted with time, trembled just enough to make a stagehand hover nervously nearby, but she waved him off with a smile, gentle, steady. The auditorium was filled with rustling programs and polite chatter. It was a community talent night. People had come expecting ukuleles, tumbling acts, and preteens reciting Shel Silverstein. They did not expect her. When the MC announced, "And now, Mrs. Ruth Ellison," a few folks clapped, mostly out of habit. A man in the back whispered, "Is she singing or telling a story?" And someone shrugged. She reached the mic, looked out over the crowd with quiet eyes. No fanfare, no music yet. And then she said it soft as memory. "This was my husband's song." The pianist started to play, his fingers uncertain at first. One chord, then another. And Ruth sang. A voice emerged, fragile, worn but full of something deeper than performance. It was the kind of voice that carried history. Not talent show polish, but the ache of loving and losing, and still remembering the words. A woman near the front closed her eyes. A teenager stopped texting. By the time Ruth reached the second verse, you could hear a breath fall. By the final note, the auditorium every last person was standing. Not out of obligation, but because they'd just witnessed something they didn't have words for. They only knew it had changed them. Ruth Ellison lived on Maple Street, 3 blocks from the post office, in a house that had settled like urgently, with time. White paint peeled from the siding. The porch swing groaned when the wind caught it just right. A chipped ceramic frog guarded her tulip bed, planted back when knees bent easier. The mailbox still bore the names Harold and Ruth in faded gold vinyl letters, curling at the corners. She was the kind of woman most people saw but didn't really see, sitting on her porch with a cup of tea, nodding to the mailman. Walking slowly through the aisles of Miller's grocery, always with a list written in cursive on an old receipt. Ruth had been a second-grade teacher for 32 years. She remembered every name, every desk. She remembered which child hated subtraction and which one cried when the class turtle died. When she retired in 1995, the school gave her a plaque and a gift certificate to the garden center. She planted daisies that year. They still came back each spring, a little thinner, but still stubbornly blooming. Harold, her husband of 57 years, had delivered mail all across town. He was tall, gentle, never in a rush. People trusted him. Kids called him Mr. H. Ruth called him home. They never had children, not for lack of trying, but it never came to be. Still, their life was full. Saturday morning pancakes, radio baseball games on the porch, shared thermoses of soup on long winter walks, and always Weishi's singing. Not in public, never that. Just for her. One song every Sunday evening. Same song, same quiet kitchen. When he passed 12 years ago, on a cold January morning, Ruth stopped humming, stopped baking. Even the radio sat silent. Neighbors noticed her porch light stayed off more often, that her tulips didn't get mulched in the fall. But no one said anything. People are kind, but they get busy. Still, she kept going. One foot, then the other. She volunteered once a week at the library, shelving large print mysteries and wiping fingerprints from reading glasses no one claimed. She never missed church, though she no longer sang the hymns. She walked every day to keep her legs strong. "You have to move," she told herself, "or you'll disappear." Then, one Tuesday in early spring, she lingered at the bulletin board in the library foyer. A flyer hung crookedly pink paper, black ink. Talent Night. Share your gift with the community. Saturday, May 17. All ages welcome. She stared at it for a long time. "Thinking of signing up?" asked a voice behind her. Ruth turned. It was Anna, the young librarian with soft eyes and the kind of patience you don't often find in someone under 30. "Oh heavens, no," Ruth said, smiling politely. "Just curious." But that night, as she sipped her tea in the silence of her kitchen, she whispered aloud to no one, "It's still in me." The song. Harold's song. The one he sang just for her. The one she hadn't heard in over a decade. She went to bed with the tune tucked inside her chest like a forgotten photograph. The next week, Anna asked again, and the next. Finally, Ruth brought a slip of paper with her name on it, folded once, placed silently on the desk. She didn't tell anyone else. Not the neighbor who sometimes brought her soup, not the pastor, not even herself, not really. She just practiced, in her mind at first, then softly in the kitchen where Harold used to stand. She stood in his spot, let the sunlight hit the floor just the way it used to. She sang once a day, no accompaniment, no mirror. And when she sang that last line, she imagined Harold, sitting in his favorite chair, eyes twinkling. Still got it, he would have said. She hoped he'd be listening on the night she stepped onto that stage. It wasn't just the absence of Harold that kept Ruth from singing. It was the silence that followed. In the first few weeks after he passed, people called, brought casseroles, left flowers, said things like, he was a good man, and call if you need anything. She nodded, thanked them, and meant it. But then the days stretched on, and the world kept spinning. Conversations became small. Cards stopped coming. Grief, Ruth learned, doesn't fade like paint or soften like bread. It settles in quiet places and stays. The Songhees song was the hardest part. It wasn't famous. Just a simple tune he'd learned in his youth, probably from his mother. No one else in town knew it. It was theirs. He would hum the first line just before he began. Evening light on the garden wall. That was her cue to sit and listen. After he died, she tried once only one set to hum it herself. Her voice cracked on the second verse. She stopped, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed without brushing her teeth. She never tried again. It felt wrong, like singing it aloud would unravel what little she still held on to. So she stored it away, tucked behind the church bulletins, the old recipes, the memories that whispered only when she let her guard down. She told herself she was fine. She had her books, her walks, her porch. But the truth? Ruth hadn't sung in 12 years. Because she was afraid that if she did, she might remember too much. Or worse, she might forget how it felt to be loved in that song. It was never meant to be a performance. The first time she sang it again, truly sang it, was in the laundry room, a Tuesday. The washer was humming, the sky outside was gray, and something about the rain tapping the window made her feel bold in that quiet, flickering way. She hummed the first line, then spoke the second, then let the whole thing out not with volume, but with weight. The tune trembled, sure. Her voice wavered like an old ribbon unspooling. But it came. And when she finished, she sat on the edge of the washer and cried for 5 solid minutes. The next day, she sang it again. This time in the garden, kneeling by the tulips. She imagined Harold sitting behind her, tying his boots, humming along. Still, she didn't plan to share it. But Anna noticed something in her one Thursday, at the library. "You seem lighter," she said. Ruth shrugged. "Just spring coming on, I suppose." Anna grinned. "Well, it's the season for blooming, isn't it?" That word stuck. Blooming. A few days later, Anna casually mentioned the talent night again while shelving new arrivals. "You know, the sign-up's still open. No pressure. But if you did want to sing something, I bet people would love it." Ruth looked at her. "You think people want to hear an old woman sing a song no one knows?" Anna didn't answer right away. She pulled a book from the shelf, straightened its spine, and said, "Sometimes the songs people don't know are the ones they need most." That night, Ruth stood at the kitchen window, cup of chamomile in hand. The house was silent, except for the refrigerator hum. She whispered the first line, and this time she didn't stop. By Saturday, she called the library. Anna answered. "I'll do it," Ruth said, "but only if I go early, before people get restless." Anna laughed, full of surprise. "You'll be third. That's the sweet spot." When she arrived at the auditorium, Anna met her at the back entrance, arm linked through hers. "You look like a movie star," she said. Ruth chuckled. "A very, very old movie star." Backstage, a young man waited by the piano. Eli, 17, kind-eyed, nervous. "You don't need to follow me exactly," she told him. "Just keep it soft." "Yes, ma'am," he said. She gave him a nod. And just like that, a song buried for more than a decade tucked into the heart of a quiet, widowed schoolteacher was ready to be heard again. She hadn't stood in front of a crowd since her retirement assembly in 1995. That day, she had worn a floral dress and clutched a bouquet of carnations. The auditorium had echoed with applause. But that was different expected, planned. This was personal. When Ruth arrived at the high school auditorium for talent night, the parking lot was full. Teenagers slouched on car hoods, toddlers clutched juice boxes, someone carried in a cake shaped like a guitar. She almost turned around. Then she saw Anna, waving at the entrance, wearing a cardigan too long for her frame and a crooked name tag. "There you are," Anna called out, hurrying to meet her. "I saved you a spot backstage, come on. You're right after the tap dancing twins." Ruth chuckled nervously. That sounds like a tough act to follow. But Anna just smiled. "Trust me, they'll remember you more." Inside, the noise swelled laughter, music, the scrape of chairs, the kind of sound that made her feel both included and invisible. She was led to a folding chair behind the curtain. The pianist, Eli, gave her a small wave. He was dressed neatly, hair combed down in the front. He offered her a cup of water. "You okay?" he asked. Ruth looked at him and said, "Honestly, I'm not sure." He didn't try to reassure her, just nodded and said, "I'll be with you the whole time." That mattered. When the MC announced her name, Mrs. Ruth Ellison, sharing a special song from her past, she rose slowly. The curtain parted. The lights weren't bright, just enough to see the first few rows. A man in a veteran's cap, a girl with braces, a young mother bouncing a sleepy baby. Ruth stepped into the glow, not with confidence, but with care. She wasn't returning to the spotlight. She was stepping back into her own life. The microphone was taller than she expected. Eli adjusted it with a quick glance to her, his hands steady, respectful. "Can you hear me?" she asked gently, her voice just loud enough to reach the front row. A few nods. Someone in the third row said softly, "We hear you." She placed both hands on the mic stand, took one breath. Then Spokenot sang her first words. "My husband used to sing this to me, every Sunday evening after dinner. Same song, same chair, same look in his eyes. I haven't sung it since he passed, but I'd like to share it with you tonight." And then, silence. Not a cough, not a whisper. Even the restless toddler in the back seemed to pause. Eli looked to her. She nodded once, and the piano began. The first note hung in the air like the scent of something remembered roast chicken in an old kitchen, a warm breeze through lace curtains. She began to sing. Her voice was soft, uncertain at first, the way one might step onto a frozen pond, unsure of the strength beneath, but the notes held, carried. Her pitch wavered here and there, but no one minded. She wasn't just singing, she was remembering. Evening light on the garden wall, your hand in mine, the leaves would fall. Her voice deepened, not in volume, but in weight. Like something buried was rising to the surface, dusted off, and made whole again. A man near the aisle leaned forward, elbows on knees. A teenager stopped chewing gum mid-chorus. An elderly woman in the back wiped her cheek with a cloth handkerchief, the kind you iron and fold. By the second verse, something changed. Ruth stood straighter. Her voice found its anchor not in technique, but in emotion. Her eyes didn't scan the room. They looked past it, to a space only she could see. To Harold, maybe. To a quiet kitchen, a Sunday evening, a cup of coffee cooling on the table. Years may come and seasons go, but love like this, you never outgrow. When the final line came, it was barely more than a whisper. "I still hear your song, even now, even slow." The piano stopped, and there was nothing. Not for a long, suspended second. Then it came, a sound not rushed, not orchestrated. Applause, rising like a gentle tide, first from the back, then the front, then all around her. Some people stood. Others remained seated, hands pressed to their hearts. Ruth lowered her head. Her hands trembled, but not from fear now, from release. She smiled. It was small, grateful. A kind of smile only earned when something long locked away finally breathes again. She didn't bow. She simply said, "Thank you," and turned to walk off. But before she could, Eli stepped forward, touched her shoulder gently, and said into the mic, "She reminded us what it means to sing with love." The crowd clapped again. But Ruth didn't hear most of it, because somewhere deep inside her, quieter than the applause, brighter than the lights, was a feeling she hadn't known in years. She felt seen, not for her age, not for her story, but for the voice she still carried and the love she never lost. The days after the talent show were quieter than she expected. No fanfare, no cameras, just the rhythm of her small life watering the tulips, heating soup, turning pages in large print mysteries by the lamp. But something had shifted. It began with a knock. A man in his 60s stood on her porch, hat in hand. Ruth didn't recognize him at first. "I'm Walter Briggs," he said. "I was in your second grade class, 1964. You used to draw owls on our book reports." She smiled. "Yes, Walter. I remember the owls." He cleared his throat. "I was at the show. I didn't know you sang. Didn't know it could feel like that. I just wanted to say, thank you." He didn't stay long, but his visit left warmth in the hallway long after the door closed. Then came the letters. Folded notes slipped into her mailbox, tucked between catalogs and utility bills. One read, "I lost my wife 3 years ago. Your song brought her back to me for a moment. I just sat there listening, thinking, she would have loved this." Another, in blue ink and careful script, "You gave my teenage granddaughter her first quiet moment in months. She asked me afterward if I ever had a song like that. We talked for 2 hours." One came from Eli, the pianist. "Mrs. Ellison, you taught me that music doesn't need to be perfect to matter. I want to play with heart now, not just hands." She placed each letter gently into the old cedar chest in her bedroom, the one with Harold's Army medals, their wedding album, and the pressed lily from their anniversary trip to Oregon. Ruth didn't talk much about the performance. When neighbors asked, she simply said, "It was a good night." But privately, in the dim hush of morning, she hummed again. She hummed while washing dishes, while folding towels, while tying her scarf before heading to church. One Sunday, sitting alone in the pew, she felt a presence beside her, not a ghost, not memory exactly, but a kind of fullness. She didn't look, didn't speak, just whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time in 12 years, when the congregation rose to sing the closing hymn, Ruth sang too. Soft, true, like someone who had made peace with silence, and now knew how to share it. She never set out to become anything more than she already was. But after the talent show, people began inviting her not out of politeness, but longing. They didn't want a performer. They wanted what Ruth had offered without knowing, a return to something real. The invitations arrived one by one. First, the local senior center asked if she might sing for their monthly potluck. Just a song or two, they said, nothing fancy. She wore a soft green shawl and brought lemon cookies. The folding chairs were filled with faces just like hers lined, kind, waiting. She sang Harold's song, then added a second, an old Appalachian lullaby she hadn't sung since her own mother hummed it over the kitchen sink. When she finished, a man with a cane stood up and said, "You made me feel like I remembered something I never even knew I'd forgotten." The next week, she received a note from the elementary school. "Would you teach the children a song from your childhood? They're learning about American folk music. We'd love to have you." So she returned to a classroom smaller now, with brighter colors and newer posters. But the desks were still low, the crayons still smelled the same, and the giggles still echoed down the hall. She taught them a simple song about stars. By the second chorus, every child was singing. Some off-key, some too loud, but all together. One boy raised his hand after. "Do you sing because you're happy, or because you're sad?" Ruth smiled. "Both," she said, "and sometimes I sing because I don't know which." The teacher wrote her later. "You gave them something they didn't even realize they needed, a moment of stillness, of connection." As the months passed, Ruth visited nursing homes, church groups, a quilting circle that met in the basement of the VFW hall. She didn't perform. She shared. A verse here, a memory there. She brought copies of old lyrics, printed large. Sometimes they sang with her, sometimes they just closed their eyes and listened. And in those gatherings, simple, unglamorous, something remarkable unfolded. People opened up. They spoke of love long lost, of songs sung in basements during the war, of dances under gymnasium lights, hands held tight, voices shaking with hope. It wasn't just Ruth's voice that healed. It was her presence, her steadiness, her quiet defiance of the idea that growing old means fading away. In her own soft way, she became something rare in that small town. Not a star, not a legend, but a lantern, held low and steady, lighting the path for others who thought perhaps their time had passed. She showed them that music doesn't end. It echoes. It was a chilly evening in late October, when the library held a gathering called Echoes of Home. There were no posters, no big announcements, just a handwritten flyer on the community board and a quiet mention during church announcements. A night of stories and songs that remind us where we come from. They held it in the reading room warm light, chairs in a circle, cider in mismatched mugs. No microphone, no stage, just neighbors. A few brought photographs. One man read a poem he'd written in 1972. A woman shared her mother's biscuit recipe, voice trembling. When it came time for Ruth, she hesitated. She hadn't planned to speak. She hadn't even worn her singing sweater. But Anna, seated beside her, gently took her hand. "Only if you feel like it," she whispered. Ruth nodded once, then rose. She didn't clear her throat, didn't explain. She simply looked around the room at the fireman's widow 2 seats over, at the teenager still in her volleyball jersey, at the man who once brought her a jar of homemade pickles. And softly she began. "Harold sang this to me when the world felt heavy. I think maybe it still helps." The room stilled. Just the creak of the radiator, the rustle of leaves against the windows. And then her voice, even softer now than it had been in May, but with more shape. She didn't need power. She had presence. Evening light on the garden wall. Someone sniffled. Someone else held their spouse's hand. By the second verse, a few began to hum along, carefully, reverently. And by the final line, the whole room was singing not loudly, not perfectly, but together. "I still hear your song, even now, even slow." When it ended, no one clapped. They simply sat there, in the stillness, holding the space, holding each other. Ruth sat down, tucked her hands in her lap. Anna leaned close, whispered, "You gave them something tonight." Ruth turned, smiled gently. "No, dear, they gave something back." That night, there were no photos taken, no recordings, just memories, carried quietly in the hearts of those who had needed a reminder that even in an ordinary room, on an ordinary night, a voice could still become a home. The days after the talent show were quieter than she expected. No fanfare, no cameras, just the rhythm of her small life watering the tulips, heating soup, turning pages in large print mysteries by the lamp. But something had shifted. It began with a knock. A man in his 60s stood on her porch, hat in hand. Ruth didn't recognize him at first. "I'm Walter Briggs," he said. "I was in your second grade class, 1964. You used to draw owls on our book reports." She smiled. "Yes, Walter, I remember the owls." He cleared his throat. "I was at the show. I didn't know you sang. Didn't know it could feel like that. I just wanted to say, thank you." He didn't stay long, but his visit left warmth in the hallway long after the door closed. Then came the letters. Folded notes slipped into her mailbox, tucked between catalogs and utility bills. One read, "I lost my wife 3 years ago. Your song brought her back to me for a moment. I just sat there listening, thinking, she would have loved this." Another, in blue ink and careful script, "You gave my teenage granddaughter her first quiet moment in months. She asked me afterward if I ever had a song like that. We talked for 2 hours." One came from Eli, the pianist. "Mrs. Ellison, you taught me that music doesn't need to be perfect to matter. I want to play with heart now, not just hands." She placed each letter gently into the old cedar chest in her bedroom, the one with Harold's Army medals, their wedding album, and the pressed lily from their anniversary trip to Oregon. Ruth didn't talk much about the performance. When neighbors asked, she simply said, "It was a good night." But privately, in the dim hush of morning, she hummed again. She hummed while washing dishes, while folding towels, while tying her scarf before heading to church. One Sunday, sitting alone in the pew, she felt a presence beside her, not a ghost, not memory exactly, but a kind of fullness. She didn't look, didn't speak, just whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time in 12 years, when the congregation rose to sing the closing hymn, Ruth sang too. Soft, true, like someone who had made peace with silence, and now knew how to share it. If this story touched something in you, some memory, some echo of your own, perhaps share it with someone who needs a reminder of quiet courage. Or take a moment to remember the songs in your life, the ones that never made it to stages, but still linger in your heart. Sometimes, The most beautiful moments come when we simply choose to listen,